The 2015 forecast is supposed to be around 2.3 to 2.8%. It might even, I've been revising the numbers within the last week or so, as strong as 3% Stock market is recently down. As you know, it opened up this morning 200 points down because the Federal Reserve did not raise interest rates. You might think, well, that's counterintuitive. The perception out there is that because the Feds did not raise interest rates, that the economy is weaker than a lot of people have thought. That and the rest of the world's economy is weaker than given as well, particularly over in China. So I want to talk to you about what I think is the world's most powerful woman, and maybe Hillary, but not quite yet before the election. Perhaps it might be Oprah. I mean, she is a billionaire, but I think maybe, well, Michelle Obama. She certainly has the ear of the president. How about Miley? No, I think the world's most powerful woman just spoke strong and loudly yesterday, Janet Yellen, chair of the Federal Reserve. And actually, the Federal Reserve has three main goals: to keep inflation low and steady, to get the country to full employment, and to grow the economy. So the Federal Reserve has been doing just exactly that. Interest rates are indeed low. Fed funds, as you know, have been at 0.25% now for almost 8 years. The discount rate is held steady at 0.75%. Let's take a look back at why the Fed has done what it did, because it's affecting all of our lives, particularly in the real estate world. So during the Great Recession, which started in December of 2007, went through all of 2008, and ended about June of 2009, about halfway in to the first year of the president's first term in office. And as all of you know, as real estate agents, you've been out there, you've lived through that Great Recession. Well, the Federal Reserve forced interest rates down to try and help the market with liquidity and credit facilities, and to help real estate and the stock market. And why have they kept the interest rates low for so long? Because the economy really is not perked up. Let me show you what I'm talking about. So the Federal Reserve's balance sheet went from about $750 billion, call it $850 billion, to as much today as about $4.5 trillion. The Federal Reserve alone is 1/4 the size of the entire United States' economy. Well, so, okay, they did that by pumping up a whole bunch of money into the economy, which was necessary for the recession, a little over $3 trillion. You would think with that much money that we might have a little problem with inflation. Well, no, here's one of the reasons why we're not going to have problems with inflation for quite some time. The velocity, the turnover of those dollars that happen to be in your purse or in your wallet are just not happening. People are not spending out there. And in fact, what people have done over the past several years is use this excess liquidity to pay down their debt. They've done that both at the individual and household level as well as the corporate level. So you can see that household debt as a ratio of disposable income is down quite a bit, which is excellent for us. So when you look at those Federal Reserve's three main goals, let's take a look a little bit closer at inflation. Inflation is just not a problem. In fact, the Feds would like inflation to be a little bit higher. They'd like it to be about 2%. They're going to get close this year. And one of the reasons that the Fed wants inflation to be higher is because if they keep interest rates low like they are, when a recession does come, because we're now almost 7 years into some sort of economic growth, as weak as it has been, they're not going to have any other tools to deal with if the recession comes in the future. So they want inflation to be high. Let's look at the other goal of the Federal Reserve, full employment. Good news all the way around. They've had 64 plus months of straight job growth, a little over 13 million jobs. But then there is some bad news on that employment horizon as well. So you can see that the official unemployment rate, U3, is a smidgen over 5%. That's great news. But it also includes people who work as little as 1 hour a week. So I think a more realistic unemployment number is called U6 by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and that counts people that are in U3 as well as discouraged workers or those who are working part-time and would like to work full-time. That number is more than double what the current unemployment rate is. To me, that's a better snapshot of what's going out there in the economy. One of the reasons that unemployment is still a problem, a nagging problem for the Feds and for us in life, is because of this labor force participation rate. What the heck is that? It is the following. the participation rate refers to the number of people who are either employed or looking for work. So the number of people who are no longer actively looking for work, if they don't have a job, no longer get counted in the labor force participation rate, and therefore the unemployment numbers drop artificially. So there you have, you can see that the labor force participation rate has been declining dramatically. Let me show you how much. There are as many people today in the labor force as was way back in 1978. That's a brutal statistic, one that the Federal Reserve is fully aware of. Maybe not a lot of people are. So why? Why are there so few people in the labor force, or as many people today as there was way back in 1978? Well, one of the reasons is that people are getting older. They're retiring. But that's only about 25% of this number. Another big reason, another 25%, is that a lot more people are now on disability insurance, which has started or doubled within the last 4 years. And last but not least, most of them, 50% of the labor force participation rate dropout is because folks cannot find a job, as we saw. The other part of this employment situation is the following. The jobs, the 13-some million jobs that have been created, unfortunately, they are mostly part-time jobs. 5 million full-time jobs have been left behind with the Federal Reserve. That all said, let's take a look at the growing economy, such as it is. When I do economic modeling and forecasting, which is what I used to do with Merrill Lynch for a number of years in Hong Kong and Sao Paulo, it's a lot like forecasting the weather. It's pretty unpredictable, especially here in Colorado. So I try and make the economy, the predictions of what did or did not happen, look a little bit like a weather forecast. You can see that the economy in 2008 was shrinking. It shrank even more in 2009. By 2010, we had grown a little bit. 2011, we stumbled. 2012, we grew a little bit more. 2013, we stumbled yet again. 2014 was a pretty good year. And then we have the current year that we just looked at. So far, we've grown about a smidgen over 2%. So what? Let's take a look at what these percentages mean. The 50-year historical average since World War II is somewhere between 3.5% to 4%. Over the last some years, we've grown at a little bit over 1%. Even if you take out the big clunker in 2009, we've only grown at about 2%. So what does that mean? It means the following. Today's current economy is lagging behind where it should be. We've been missing out on anywhere from 2 to 3% GDP. 2 to 3% may not sound like a very big number, but 2 to 3% represents anywhere from $325 to $500 billion of missed economic growth each year. That means we have missed out on anywhere from 1.9 to as much as $3 trillion in economic growth because of some of the policies and procedures put into place. All right, that all said, here's my grading system for the Federal Reserve. On the inflation front, they've done a pretty good job. Employment, not bad. Growing economy, we could have done a lot better. But I would say that maybe really that rather than giving them a C+, I would like to say that the grade is incomplete. We still got a long ways to go. The executive branch has not been very helpful to the Fed. The Fed alone cannot do everything it takes to get the economy growing. So here's what's been going on fiscally. These are some of the unusual, historically uneventful events that have hit us fiscally. And all that has cost us about $9 trillion. That's a lot of money spent for not much very bang for the buck. If you remember back in 2012 and 2013, the brouhaha about the fiscal cliff, we're going to have that same sort of story come up again at the end of this month when they're going to raise the debt ceiling at the federal level. Well, back in 2013, the amount of debt that we had at the federal level was about $16.5 trillion. Today, it's at $18.3 trillion. So despite all the efforts of Congress and the President, we have still overspent by $2 trillion in less than 2 years. To put this in perspective, the amount of our federal gross debt, $18.3 trillion, is more than we earn, all of us combined in this country, the entire GDP of $17.9 trillion. To put it in perspective for you as real estate agents, if you had a client that you were wanting to go show real estate to, and they told you that their debt to income ratio was 105%, would you even take him around and show him any real estate? You'd probably kick him out of the car. Well, this is where we're at as a country. But two main areas have benefited quite a bit from this monetary policy: stock market, real estate. Let's take a brief look at the stock market. What I'm showing you is 10 years worth of the Dow. The Dow may not be the best measure to use. It measures only the largest 30 stocks, but the S&P 500 shows the same results. When you look at where we were right before the Great Recession's drop, we were at 14,000 and change. It dropped down to 6,000 and change, a 50% drop in the stock market. This is what's happened since then because of the easy money policies of the Federal Reserve. We are up at 18,000. Today we're down to about 16,000. We're up over 10,000 points in that amount of time. Does anybody think that there might be a stock market bubble? I'm not predicting one. I'm just asking the question. There's some of the measures of the Dow over that period of time. Real estate, which is what you and I are all about. We have been in the sweet spot of this monetary policy. It took a while for it to positively affect us. 2009 and 10 and 11 weren't all that great of years in real estate. But by 2012, things were looking a lot better. And then 2013 and 2014 were they were bang-up years for you folks. So let's take a look here. 30-year conventional mortgages are at their lowest ebb ever. I need to go back. There we are. Because of the interest rate policy of the Fed. The Housing Affordability Index is way up, making houses more expensive. And in fact, if you look at the Case-Shiller Composite 20 Home Index, and then the Case-Shiller 10 City Index is in the red circles as well. I overlaid them all on one single map. There's what we did in 2013. There's what home prices did in 2014. And here's what we've done so far year to date in 2015. But number 3 in the country is Dallas. Number 2 in the country is San Fran. And number 1 in the country for price home increases is Denver, up 10.2%. All right. There's the same number, so I have a question. Why? Why are prices up so much in Denver? You see, I've got 4 bullet points here. I did have a 5th one. It was a marijuana, but they told me take that out. No, not really. Here are some other reasons besides the grow industry. Net migration to Colorado, shortage of construction workers. Colorado's economy is doing pretty dang well. And Colorado's energy sector is negatively impacted because of that oil plunge. That means the following. You would think that there would be more workers then available from the oil well rigs to come and work on construction. It seems all the folks from North and South Dakota, however, have skipped Colorado, and they just went on south to Arizona, Nevada, and New Mexico. We have a real shortage of construction workers here. How many of you have any do-it-yourself home projects at your own house? Yeah, so quite a few of you. How long has it taken to get anything set up? It takes about 6 months just to get it going. All right, that all said, oil prices are plunging, as you fully well know. They're in the mid-40s right now. They're probably looking at a good $30 a barrel. That will persist for the next 2 years easy. That's one of my predictions. So think of the drop in the oil prices being sort of like a tax cut. In fact, if they stay down for the remainder of this year and next, that'll be like the average family getting about $1,100 a year. But again, it's sort of damaging to the energy sector in terms of layoffs. Let me sort of fast forward something. I want to show you, because I'm in the last minute here, Gen Y's impact. Who are the millennials? Because they are impacting the real estate market in several different ways. So Gen Y is anybody 1980 to 1985 being born, and they are now the largest demographic cohort in history. You take out the World War II and the Gen Xers, and you can see that millennials are now at 83-some million dollars. And in Colorado, they're driving the market. In 2014, 2015, they became the largest age demographic. And they are going to affect Colorado's economy for the next 25 years. You can see that the net migration into Colorado is predominantly millennials. They are by far the largest cohort. And in fact, in the next 10 years, they will totally dominate the state of Colorado. They're driving the real estate market. Let me fast forward here because I've got 30 seconds left. 30 seconds. He winked at me. That means he's letting me slide. So Ignore the millennials at your peril. They are a significant power in the workforce place. They're making Denver the #2 most popular city to move to. And in fact, they're driving the rental market, as I think almost everybody knows. And you look at what happened in the mid-1990s when there were more renters than home buyers. Take a look at where we are now. This disparaging gap between renters and people actually forming a household, buying a home, is going to continue for at least the good next 3 to 5 years. And that gives rise to different niches in the Denver marketplace, from Rhino to South Broadway. And let me see where if I can end here with a little bit of class. There's one part here that I'd like to show you that's really holding back millennials from entering the house industry. They have debt. Most millennials aren't buying a home because they already got a mortgage hanging around their neck. And that mortgage is called student loan debt. It's about $1.1 trillion. So I think I'm done, because otherwise he's going to come up and yell at me. Yes? No? All right. Keep going? All right. Questions, Q&A, or am I supposed to let the other folks come on? You tell me. Hello. Question and answers? Okay.
Thank you, Tracy. Now let's move into the panel discussion. I'll start the discussion with some questions we formulated beforehand, and we'll take questions from the audience at the end of the discussion. Let's meet our speakers. First, we have Celeste Starchild, Vice President and General Manager of List Hub. Ron France. Ron is the Vice President of Industry Relations for RPR. Good morning. Lauren Hansen, Lauren is the CEO for Iris. Kirby Sleneker. Kirby is the President and CEO for RE Colorado. John Whitney. John is the Director of MLS and Industry Development for Zillow Group. Go ahead and have a seat. Let's talk first about syndication and what it means from both the MLS and syndicator perspective. Lauren, from an MLS perspective, can you talk about the difference between syndication and IDX?
Sure. The similarities, I'll start with, are that the listings are going to be publicly displayed. IDX, however, is broker to broker. It is an opt-in or opt-out depending on your MLS's approach to it, but it is a broker website. It could be that it's bettybroker.com, or it could be that it's remax.com. Syndication, on the other hand, is a third-party website destination, and it may be that it is a direct feed via the MLS, or it could be that you're using a service such as List Hub in order to get the information to that third-party site. But the bottom line is, in both situations, the broker is the one who decides where the listing goes.
Thank you, Lauren. Kirby, do you have anything to add to that?
I guess a couple things. I always look at IDX as much like what Lauren described, but IDX really is a way to advertise listings for broker reciprocity, and I always say it's for the brokers in this room that play by the rules, whereas syndication is more, it's going out to everybody else that aren't the brokers primarily, and sometimes they like to make their own rules.
Okay, and Kirby, with regard to syndication, how can the MLS work in the best interest of the broker, and what is RE Colorado doing?
I guess maybe the most important thing we can do is help educate brokers for all the nuances of syndication, all the different ways that their listings get out into the marketplace. So many of them are surprised to find out that not only the MLS sends it someplace on their behalf, but also you have a lot of other entities as well, sometimes virtual tour companies, franchisors, really all of that. So I think the education piece and having the correct tools in place so that brokers have choice about where their listings go, because they're really the advertising experts, and we want to make sure they're in control of their listings.
Thank you. Lauren, as an MLS, how do you balance listing syndication and broker control?
They overlap. I think that the philosophy of our MLS is that the broker decides how they market their properties, where they market their properties, and they are the ones that best determine the ROI on where that distribution is or is not.
Thank you. Now we've heard great perspective from the MLS. Let's move into the syndicators we have with us today. Tell the group why syndicate. Celeste, we'll start with you. Why syndicate? What is the benefit?
I think the answer is different for every firm. I've been in this industry for a long time, and the one thing that I've learned is that no agency is different, no brokerage firm is the same, and they all have different needs. And so when I look at what we do for the industry, I will say this, that there are a lot of different ways to syndicate. Kirby touched on a couple of those. There are virtual tour providers out there. There are platforms such as the ListHub platform that we operate. There are website vendors that will distribute your listings to a variety of websites on your behalf. And they're not all created equal. There are so many different options out there that it's hard to speak to any one of them. I can only speak to ours. And I think that to summarize our approach to it, we really try to put boundaries around the syndication in the sense that publishers who participate in our network who may be recipients of your content, should you send it there, are bound to certain terms and certain rules and certain standards that prohibit them from doing things that are, I'll say, unintended, such as redistributing content to additional sites, keeping the listing content after the listing goes off market, just to name a couple of examples. And so for most of our customers, the philosophy is that your duty is to provide the maximum opportunity for your sellers to find a qualified buyer for a property, and that means exposing the listing content to as many eyeballs as possible. So I'd say that's the predominant theory. However, there are some other advantages that a lot of our customers see. We support not just syndication to websites, but also data management for companies that are trying to solve problems where they have to enter listings into multiple systems. And I'll give you an example of that. Any firms that are part of the Realogy brands, so Century 21, Coldwell Banker, et cetera, or Keller Williams, or soon to be another one actually, can use the ListHub platform to synchronize the listing content for their firm between the MLS system, which of course is going to be the most accurate source of data that's going to have all the right rules and regs in place to ensure quality, et cetera, with the back office software products that Keller Williams, Realogy, and other firms operate. And so by doing that synchronization, we're just helping to keep all the data consistent, accurate across different systems, and reduce the amount of work that every agent has to do to enter data into multiple systems. So I think the advantages are really broad. Those are a few of them, and depending on individual agency needs, I think there are many, many others.
Thank you. John, any different perspective from the Zillow Group?
Well, I think as far as why syndicate, it's really up to the broker and the agent to work with the client and decide how they want to market that property. Some want to do it real specifically with targeted sites, and some want to do it really broadly. So if they want to do it broadly, platforms like ListHub and others do a really good job of managing that data. If they want to do it specifically, then there's certainly options for them to do that. But some consumers want to see the listings scattered in as many places as possible. And so in order to meet that, you really need a tool like that in order to manage the data correctly and keep it accurate. But it's really to meet what the consumer is asking for.
Thank you. John, there are a lot of changes happening in terms of the relationship between syndicators, MLS, and brokers. Specifically, how do you get the data?
As far as Zillow Group, the data, Zillow at its core is a database of all the properties in the country. So it was set up and initially established that way. The data comes from public records, so that the database is updated that way. Homeowners will go in and update their own property record. It's kind of like Wikipedia, where you can go in and update your own information. And so updates come that way, and then as brokers and agents work with those property owners to sell and market the property, they add additional information to really turn that property record into a marketable listing. And those are the primary ways that we receive the data. The brokers and agents use different methods to get it to us, but that's how the data comes to a Zillow group for the most part.
Thank you. What are the ways that portals receive listings from brokers and agents now? And what are the primary benefits to agents, brokers, and clients?
Yeah, so we get, different portals have different methods and ways of receiving data. The way that we currently get it from brokers and agents is certainly a primary vehicle where areas that we have MLS support is through the ability using either a direct type of feed option or some other method that the MLS has set up for the brokers to be able to opt their listings into a feed from the MLS, which is certainly the best route for many brokers to go. It's the most accurate data. It has the infrastructure to keep it fast. And the MLS, because they're involved in these conversations a lot, is able to craft an agreement that makes sure that the IP rights are protected, that the interests are protected, and have the data come under those kind of terms. Larger brokers and franchises will set up direct feeds that come from their own databases instead of the MLS, and that could be an internal franchise system and have the listings come to us that way. That works really well. The MLS data tends to be more accurate, so we will see those brokers and agents shift to an MLS feed if they have that option, but we do receive them directly from those systems. And then you really need to have about 250 listings or so in order to be feasible on a feed. So below that, we'll have agents and brokers using manual entry tools. They'll use online services. They'll use other methods in order to get the data to us in a way that they want. So different means that they use to deliver the data, but it's really up to them, and we just try and work with the partners that we have to make it as easy as possible to do that and maintain the listings on an ongoing basis.
Thank you, John. Kirby and Lauren, do you have anything to add on the relationship dynamics based on John's comments? Lauren, I'll address you first.
One of the approaches that we took, again, putting the broker in the driver's seat and even getting a little bit more granular and allowing the office broker to make the call, is that on our MLS system, the office broker is the first one to determine, let's just use Zillow Group since we can pick on John since he's here. The office broker is the first one that says, yes, I want our listings to be on Zillow Group. Once that happens at the individual listing level, then the listing broker also has the option to say yes or no. Conversely, if the office broker says, I do not want to have our listings exposed on Zillow Group sites for whatever reason, when that listing broker is at the individual listing level, he doesn't even have the option, or she doesn't have the option of saying yes or no. It's already been determined on their behalf.
Thank you. And Kirby?
Well, we built our own syndication portal as well, and we have listing level control where the managing broker determines what the syndication set is for their agents. But then at listing level, listing entry time, each agent can say where they want it to go. If they want to do send it everywhere, they can do that. If they want to engage in exclusive local use, which in a Denver market where you really only have 6 or 7 weeks worth of inventory, sometimes people can get a great listing. They know it's going to show well. They're going to have 30 showings this weekend, 5 offers by Sunday night. They know they don't have to send it anywhere, and our portal lets them do that.
I want to go down the row on the next question. How can brokers ensure listings are coming through authorized channels? John.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's a tough challenge for brokers because we talked about different means that the managing broker can set up to allow the other brokers to leverage. And those are great because the things that Celeste talked about and Kirby and Lauren with terms and an infrastructure are all supported. But it's difficult to manage what some of the other brokers are doing, and we'll get the same listing 3 or 4 times. And it's because there's products and services and virtual tours and others that agents and brokers use that may be syndicating the listings with their knowledge, sometimes without their knowledge. So I think you need to have either a franchise broker level feed or an MLS feed that is going, or a list hub type of feed that's going to trump those listings from displaying if they do come in from those often inferior sources, so the data remains accurate. But then I think it's important to scrutinize the service providers and make sure that if they are going to be syndicating listings, that the brokers are aware of it, where they're going and managing it. Because the calls that I tend to get are when we hear this listing is on joesgaragewebsite.com, how did it get there? Oftentimes it's through a service that the agent or broker used that sent the listings and they just didn't know it. And that listing's a remnant that sits there for a long time and has difficulty going away.
Kirby?
I tell everybody that John personally sent it there himself, is what I tell them. But actually, I think it's really important for every brokerage to make a decision on how they're going to syndicate their listings. Pick one channel and stick with it, and then be really aware and very careful to read all those end-user license agreements that nobody, in terms and conditions that nobody wants to read. But read those so that when you do sign a deal for a virtual tour or anything else, that you know that, hey, actually buried in there is they're going to send your data someplace, and you're giving them the right to do that. So make sure you don't sign those, you don't agree to those. Pick one channel as a brokerage and say, this is how we're going to get it. And I'll use an example. So if you're a RE/MAX franchise, you're going to let RE/MAX LLC send it for you, but you're not going to engage in all the other channels. Or you're going to let RE Colorado send it for you, but not anybody else. It's when you engage with lots of different channels that suddenly it's like, I don't know where it's going. It's kind of got out of control, and it's really in 14 places and now that you're not aware of. Maybe not 14, maybe 400. So,
Lauren?
I would echo much of what Kirby said. I think where it starts is a discussion internally within the office, and fortunately, Colorado is way ahead of the curve with a commission position statement that was issued earlier this summer that now makes listing syndication part of the office policy manual within each office. And it means that the dialogue needs to occur, and I think that's where it starts. And I would also agree, there was the day where more is better. I would argue that. I'm not certain that that is the case, because once you have it on 14 or 400 sites, then what? And as the listing broker, are you still responsible where all of that information is displaying? Is the past owner or the new owner going to weigh in and have any complaints or rights about the photos or the information that appears? I think smaller is better. Figure out where your most effective channels are, whether it's through your franchise or whether it's through Colo Property or RE Colorado or other sites. But I think the days of more is better, I hope, are gone.
Interesting. Yeah. Now, Kirby, I usually say that you did it.
oh, okay.
That's
Good to
unlike
know.
John. Actually, I think Kirby and John and Lauren have basically answered that pretty succinctly. I think one of the issues is various MLSs, various brokers do it all various ways. And so there's all kinds of different methodology happening out there, including List Hub and including listing agents directly putting things into all kinds of places. And so some standardization needs to happen. I think it's a good conversation to have, at this time. It's pretty important. So yeah, less is more.
Celeste?
Well, I like what Kirby said and what Lauren said about the need for dialogue within every firm. For better or for worse, it is something we all have to pay attention to. I think that, even within all of our options, different sites to send to, what method you're going to send the listings, if you're going to send the listings. I think there's a happy medium. I kind of hear this theme coming out from the panel right now about, is less more, or, is broad distribution the right move for a firm. And I think, again, I'll just reiterate, it's different for every firm. And I think if you look through the different options, for example, in the dashboard that we provide, you're going to see sites like LandWatch that are extremely powerful in certain geographies that have a lot of open land or ranch land or recreation property for sale. Lake Homes USA, waterfront properties, or water view properties are featured on that site. They get huge conversion rates with consumers who are trafficking their site. Companies like Kaping, one of the most broker-friendly websites I've seen emerge in a very long time. And they do free virtual tours for agents. They have a wealth of services out there. For better or for worse, it takes time and it takes attention. And I would encourage every firm just to look at all those options in detail. And to what John Whitney said, unfortunately, yes, you do have to look at every single provider you work with, every virtual tour company, and see what their policies and procedures are. A lot of these companies are syndicating your listings, kind of like you order a hamburger, and they say, would you like fries with that? And it's not a fries with that kind of thing, right? So we're way past that point now in our industry. It's an important business decision. There are real risks to listing content being distributed and used in unintended ways. So it's really important that you scrutinize very carefully every single product, every software product where your content is pushed, and understand their policies, understand whether they're distributing your data, and take an active role in making those decisions.
Thank you. There's a lot of discussion about brokers having control of their listings. A solution to that problem has been the development of Upstream. Ron from RPR, can you talk a little bit about Upstream and AMP and how those two products work together?
Sure. I won't go into too much of the history of how they evolved, but let's just kind of talk about the concepts and what they are. And I think probably almost everybody in this room has heard about them at some point. I'll start with AMP. AMP is a project that NAR and the Realtors Property Resources is working on. It's a database system very similar to the database that RPR is evolved from. And so you're looking at a database system with public records, assessment information, deed information, anything that we can find, foreclosure information, and build into the database for over 160 million properties across the United States. And so that database will become the idea of a back-end system that MLSs could use in conjunction with a front-end system. So really sort of a departure from, in the MLS industry, sort of a departure from an all-in-one system. You'll have the option of using a back-end to keep and house all the data, and then decide on which front-end your users would like to use. And so it'll be a different process than it is today. And so that's kind of a quick synopsis of AMP. Upstream is a couple of things. Upstream is an LLC formed by a group of brokers and franchises. And this group decided, really at a very simplistic description, they decided they needed more control over their data. And so we talk about syndication, and we talk about a lot of the things that brokers do with their data. And so this particular group decided they wanted more control. And in order to do that, they thought that they would need a platform or a system that they could use to put data in and to send data out. And so the other thing that Upstream is the platform. So it will be called Upstream. And the idea is the broker is upstream, and they will decide where their data goes downstream. So they will do the listing input, and they will decide then where they want it to be syndicated. They will obviously send it to the MLS. And the upstream piece of it right now, I think is important to understand, is conceptual. We're actually very close. We've been working with Upstream. The funding is already approved for it. We've been working with them on the agreement to build the platform for them, and we're probably in what I would call the signing phases right now, but nothing has been signed yet. So it's still in the conceptual mode at this point.
So could these two products create a national MLS?
That might be better answered by Lauren and Kirby, but the reality is, a national MLS would take millions of dollars, many millions of dollars. Many, many employees, maybe thousands or 1,000 employees. I mean, it would be sort of an enormous undertaking that in reality could probably never happen. Will there be large regional MLSs? Absolutely. The idea behind AMP and Upstream is a national database, not a national MLS. A national database that offers standardized data across the board. And while it sounds simplistic, it's extremely complicated. It's complicated regarding the rules and the regulations, and real estate is local, and the MLS is local, and so there's really a lot involved to make that happen. It's a very deep conversation.
Thank you. Okay, that's the last question we have for today's industry trends. We can open up for questions for the audience in this last bit of time remaining. There's 4 microphones around the room. Please come to the microphone to ask your question. Go
Hello,
ahead.
April.
Good morning.
2 questions. In this evolution of this database, to what extent is appraiser data finding its way into these systems? And how good really is the Zestimate, and what's its future?
I guess I can take the Zestimate part.
I think
John?
that's John's
Right. Take it away, John.
Well, I think what I hear, the Zestimate certainly has been a work in progress. It's gotten better in many markets. It depends on how much data is there to interpret the Zestimate and make it more clear. It's still ideally a conversation starter with the client. Our goal is to get that consumer connected with a real estate professional and allow the real estate professional to use their expertise to really define what the value of the property is. But I would say it's improved. It's an algorithm, right? So the more data we have, the more it matures, the more we're able to tweak it. It gets better. We're going to start to see more of these AVMs pop up on different sites with some of the NAR policy changes. So I think we'll see different iterations of a property value like we do now. But there's some places where it's great, and some places where it's extremely difficult. And places like even here in Colorado or Florida, where a property on one side of the street can be this, or the other side of the street can be that. It's very difficult to do, but it's improving. It's a work in progress, and we're constantly tweaking it to improve it.
Okay. Anyone else?
I can take the appraiser data question. So basically, when we talk about the databases that we have today, there's really 2 pieces that are built into that, and that's public record data that we pull from municipalities or other types of sources of public record data. U.S. Census data, Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's a lot of data that goes into these databases. And then the other piece of it is broker data, listing content data. So as we are today, although it be incredibly valuable, the appraiser data is not in that world right now. Appraisers do not enter data into the MLS. They're not brokers. They're not real estate practitioners in that room. So right now, there's no conversation about building appraiser data into those databases that I know of, although it would be fabulous.
Okay, your question?
Good morning, April. My name is John, and I've got a question regarding a listing that I have. It was in 3.5 years ago when I sold this piece of property. I've since relisted the property, went in and found that it was still being marketed, although it indicated off-market. This question goes to the control and viability and correctness of the data. When I re-enter this home into the MLS system and then go on to the current websites and search engines, I find that this house is still being listed on Zillow. I have no control over the data. I cannot remove it. I cannot change it. I cannot update it. But yet to my client, they're seeing outdated data, and I have no way of being able to correct it. How do I remove this old 3.5-year listing so that I can show the public?
Bless you.
So I assume that when you say the property is still being marketed, that it's still showing as a for sale status where it shouldn't be. Sometimes when you look at it, because it is a existing property record, it appears to be marketed when it isn't. So we got to just make sure that it's actually showing a list price and it appears to be listed. If it's an errant listing that shouldn't be there, it's very easy for us to remove that. So I don't know if it's still coming in through some service that you may have used or something. We have to check the source of the listing and where it's coming, so once we remove it or change the status, it doesn't relight up again because it's coming in through some service or feed somewhere. But certainly, see me after. I'll give you my card. You can reach out to me. We have different resources, but you can report it there. But let's make sure that we get it removed. We don't want inaccurate, errant listings on any of the sites. We want the listings to be accurate.
And therein lies the issue. We have no control over the data. Once it becomes syndicated, it's out of our hands. The intellectual property that we put our names on is taking out of our control. I should not have to go to any specific agency to have a piece of property removed once it's been sold and closed. There's an automatic feed in. There should be an automatic reduction of that listing. I understand that it's marketing, but when my client says, why is that data being shown on an internet search engine or on a commercial database and it's no longer being listed, I've lost control of it and I look like I don't know what I'm talking about or doing to my client.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So as far as just Zillow goes, I think it'd be healthy to do a Google search and see if that listing is appearing somewhere else. That'll help track down where the source of the problem might be. But certainly we don't want it there if it's not an actively marketed property. We want to have an excellent consumer experience. We want you to look great, and it doesn't work if that's the case. So we just really need to track down where that's coming from and get it fixed. And some of it depends on how the listing is coming to us. If it's a feed coming from an MLS or something like that, then there's obviously something that's broken or slipped through if that didn't happen, because the automation that you're looking for really comes when we have that MLS pathway in place and we're able to sync up your listings with what we have. If it's not a feed like that, then it does require manual effort to keep it maintained. So we just, oftentimes it really comes down to tracking down where's it coming from. Let's get it fixed. Let's make sure it's not going to pop up again. And if there's an error in the process that brought the listing, let's find out what that is and get that stopped as well.
Next question.
I heard most of the people on the panel say that less is more, and they agreed with that. I'm a little concerned from the point of view of a home seller, that if I sit with a home seller and say, well, look, we can have your home out on, pulling these numbers out of the air, 1,000 different websites, but 25% of them may not be accurate, and the listing may linger for a few years after it's sold. Or I can have more control and make sure it's only on 150 websites, but that information is completely accurate. Would you rather have it on the 1,000 or the 150, even though the 1,000 might not be all totally accurate? I think most home sellers are going to say, put it on as many as possible. I want everyone to see it. Comments, please.
I can comment to that. I mean, within the List Hub platform, if you count up all of the different small, local, or regional newspapers, for example, up to bigger sites like homes.com, you are talking about nearly 1,000 different domains. And no, the listings will not be inaccurate. No, you will not have the problems that the gentleman was describing where the listing stays on 3 years later and continues to get fed and refed. Again, the List Hub platform builds in all these rules in place, and we have a compliance department that does nothing all day but go and hunt for our content on various sites, looking for errors, looking for violations on your behalf so that you don't have to. And so you can actually have both. So, like I said, about 800 to 1,000 different domains are represented within our platform within a safe, secure environment. You don't have to make those difficult choices.
So more is more.
I would say this. I would say, what is the harm if you can be sure that a website is going to treat your content with the respect that it deserves? It's, as the other gentleman said, it's your intellectual property. It's yours to decide that it's going to be marketed on behalf of your home seller while you're listing the property. The information should be used for nothing else, for no other purposes, or for no longer period of time after the listing goes off market. It's very simple. What you're asking for is not too difficult. You kind of have to look at the DNA of the companies that you work with. At ListHub, we're part of Move. We also operate Realtor.com. We are partners with the industry. We work very deeply within organized real estate. We don't take listings from virtual tour companies. ListHub doesn't, and Realtor.com doesn't. We only work within organized real estate, working with our MLS partners, with brokerage firms to make these decisions and make sure that the industry experience is a good experience and the consumer experience is a good experience. So you kind of have to look at the DNA of the companies you're working with.
Lauren, did you have a comment?
I do. I don't think that it's a one-size-fits-all, and I'm probably tainted because of what I do, but I think it is, yet again, another opportunity to have a dialogue between the broker and the seller, and to say, if I was in the selling position, if you had a convincing argument that the best 3 sites where we get the most response are A, B, and C, and that's where I'd like to try your listing for the first 30 days, because I believe that it's going to tap into the local or regional market. Let's say it's a condo that's in Old Town Fort Collins, or a downtown Boulder 2-bedroom condo. Why would I want it on fieldandstream.com? Just asking. Let's match up the seller. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not sure that I believe you. As an educated seller, I don't know that I would say more is better. Just my perspective.
Ron?
And for me, the conversation less is more wasn't about the syndication of websites. It's about points of entry and standardization of points of entry. So 1,000, 10,000, look at Google. I mean, it can be in as many places as you want it. As long as the data is accurate and standardized and is the way that the broker would like to see it at that point. So to me, less is more in that regard. If your seller wants to have it on every place, including the moon, then I think that's fabulous.
Right.
But let's just make sure we get the data right on all those places, not just on a handful of them.
Thank you.
Kirby?
I honestly believe that when you look at this, one of the first observations has to be, if you send it everywhere, do you really think you're going to have control? There's an awful lot of things that would have to be in place for you to have control if you send it to 4,000 websites. If you do engage in that mindless maximum exposure where you just blast it everywhere, I think you have to ask yourself, are you going to have control at the end? The answer is probably not. And I think the other thing is, if you study it a little bit, targeted marketing is a lot better than just blasting it everywhere. One of the things that came out in the industry about 2 years ago is we had one of our syndicators sending data to SoFun, which is one of the largest websites in China for real estate. You're going to get a lot of buyers for Old Town Fort Collins coming from Shanghai and Guangzhou? Probably not. So I think that comment that Lauren made about the conversation between the listing agent and the seller, how do you want to market this? If you're really serious about selling your home, where are the serious sites where serious home buyers go? And if you want to blast it everywhere, the consequences probably are, the bigger the ripple, the more you're going to lose control. And I think that's just a reality, not only in this industry, but lots of industries that deal with data licensing.
Thank you. Next question.
Mike Tripp from Pueblo. One of the questions I have are the leaks. How does an individual MLS or an individual broker, when I look around this room and I see 400 or 500 individual brokers that want to do the best job they possibly can for their seller, how do you control those leaks from an MLS point of view?
Lauren?
For our public website, which is coloproperty.com, all of the leads always go to the listing broker, period, end of discussion. You cannot buy your way into that position. It goes back to the listing broker.
That's the same with us as well. Your listing, your lead, listing broker only.
Anyone else? Thank you. Next question?
He was up before I was.
Oh, okay, sorry.
David Scott, Boulder. I think there's another person in this that we haven't considered and talked about, and that is the buyer of the house, particularly in the luxury category. They don't want pictures out there that identify their house. They don't want pictures that allow people to see how they could get in and get out of the house. So this is another one of the things that I think we as agents have to be concerned with.
I have no problem having this discussion about syndication. And I would say 90% of the time my people say, we want to go in a much more limited way. We don't need all these other things. I have had this interesting one. I have had a client who had somebody nibbling at her all the time. You're not on this, you're not on this, you're not on this. But we eventually worked through it. I said, you can have that, but here are the ramifications. Here are the issues that may be there. So it's up to us. I think we can control it.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, I'm Darrell Wass. I'm president of the Pikes Peak MLS in Colorado Springs. One of the things we've had an agreement with ListHub for quite some time, and I have to say we don't get complaints about the accuracy of data and when it goes up and when it comes down. Lauren mentioned before the commission position statement for offices, that now we need to incorporate that into our office policy. So those conversations, you need to go back and definitely have those with your offices. But what came out earlier in the year was the fact that brokers are responsible for that data coming down in a timely manner. So the Real Estate Commission came out and said, your data has to be down. The onus is on us to make sure that it comes down. So my question is, we as a state have requirements. How do you, as a Zillow group, where we get the most complaints from, plan to address that issue that is now part of our licensing?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Like I said before, we don't want to have listings that are not accurate and not reflecting the proper status. And we don't create that content, right? So if the broker is using a synchronized type of feed with either their franchise system, their broker database, their MLS system, that's great, because that will automatically update the status and make that happen, assuming that all of those other leaks that we talked about and all the other things have been tightened up. We do have brokers and agents that will use services or manually input listings. That's much more challenging for them, because it's really incumbent upon them to go in and manually update that status when it happens. We'll watch it, and we try to assume that maybe this listing isn't active anymore, and so we'll try to reach out to the broker and verify whether it is, so we can remove it if it's no longer active. At the same time, it's a challenge because we don't want to remove it if it's still active. So it really requires either having and leveraging a system that's going to do that work for the broker, or real attention to be sure that when the property changes, and if that person has manually provided that listing, that gets updated and reflected as well. But that only solves the problem with one particular portal. If that listing has been syndicated by a virtual tour company, then it's much more difficult to do that on a broad scale. So everything else we talked about, whether it's selectively choosing the channel so it can be managed, or whether it's using a system like ListHub that will manage it on a broader scale for the broker, those are all really important. So I think we've kind of come to a place in syndication, especially here in Colorado, where it's gone from send it everywhere, and then great tools come along to allow you to manage it. And now it's a much more focused approach with some liability attached. It's really important to have the conversations we talked about before and put the systems in place in order to do it. If you have any listing like that that's still reflected that way, it's real easy to contact us, and we'll get that taken care of. But my best advice would be use the systems that are going to do that work for you, whether it's a ListHub, an MLS feed, whether it's a broker franchise feed, and leverage the tools that are there.
And one of the big complaints is that you're not easy to get a hold of. You're not easy to get things changed. So I think all of us would really like to know what that method is to get a hold of you to actually get some things changed.
Well, I think it's a challenge with any place. So if you're a premier agent or somebody that has an enhanced relationship, certainly have a contact. If we're using an MLS or a broker franchise type of relationship, they have upper level contacts. Lauren has a number she can call that the MLS, that's an MLS and a managing broker number. So it may be that we need to get you the right information, but I know that our goal is to create a great customer experience and make you look good. so that listing needs to get repaired. So, that's another thing where if you're frustrated with not getting hold of the right people, that's part of my job, is being a resource for the MLSs, so there's somebody so we can fix that problem. But I know we want to get it fixed, so we'll just have to figure out a best way for you to get that support that you need.
Yeah, if you had something on the agent portal where they could say, hey, this needs fixed, that would.
Yeah, there's some things in there. I think sometimes it's the resources are there, but you got to find them. So one of the things I've noticed, being kind of part of the industry for a while and being relatively new to Zillow Group, is if we really want them to be able to report that this listing is inaccurate, let's make that more prominent. If we want to drive people to know what the Zestimate is and the best way to interpret that, let's make sure that the consumer knows if they click here, they're going to get that resource page that says talk to it, get it appraised, talk to an agent, get a professional to look at this. Those kind of things, in my mind, as these platforms have matured and now have become more industry partners, really reflect that relationship a little bit more than they probably do in certain instances like that.
Thank you.
Thanks. We have time for 2 more questions. Your question, please.
Hi, my question is about the mapping services that you provide on these syndication sites. Especially in our mountain communities, we find that a lot of our listings are put into locations that are not even close to where the actual listing is located. Whenever I've inquired about this, I always hear, oh, we're working on it, but I never see that the problem's been resolved. Is there a way that we can manually go in and change the locations or correct that, or have the ability in the future to do it? Because it doesn't seem like that fixing it problem is happening very quickly.
Sure. Yeah, at least as far as the Zillow Group sites go, you can contact us and we can verify where it is and move that pin to where it needs to be. I think mapping's always been a challenge ever since we started embedding it into MLS systems back in the in the 90s. And it used to be keyed off of the address, which you never know, that could be entered in a bunch of different ways. We've gotten better at being able to, GPS coordinates and other things to actually park that listing where it needs to be. I have the same challenges when I'm trying to find a Starbucks in Nebraska. Sometimes it has me going to the wrong place or the place isn't there. But you can let us know and we can move the pin and get it put into the right spot. And ideally, that helps us identify that property better the next time, because now we have those coordinates to be able to plan it where it needs to be.
Thank you. Sherry?
Hi, April.
Hi. Got your microphone down there.
I do. It's better than standing on a chair. Celeste, I have a question for you regarding ListHub's relationship with Zillow Trulia. I understand that you no longer are syndicating to them. Can you share with us what that was all about? And I have a second follow-up question.
Sure. So it's a really short story. It's very simple. The Zillow Group decided that they did not want to continue to work with ListHub, walked away from the negotiation table, and decided they didn't want to agree to our terms. I can't speak to why. I found out about it in the media the same way you did, just so you know. On Inman News one morning, so that was an exciting day. There've been some challenges for all of us through all of those changes. I know that wasn't a simple transition for everyone, but it's over. If somebody doesn't want to work with you, you can't work with them, and that's just the long and short of it.
And then, John, I'm just one of those really curious people. What % of your company's income is derived from brokers?
I would say, well, I guess I'm not too versed in the nuances of that question, but I can tell you that our revenue comes from advertising, whether it's an industry type of advertiser like a bank or a car company or something like that. And the rest of the revenue comes from brokers and agents that are advertising in the various methodologies within Zillow Group brands. I hate to throw out a specific percentage, but I would say that probably a majority percentage is coming from brokers and agents. Consumers aren't our customer necessarily. our customers from that perspective are brokers and agents for the most part and other advertising partners. But
So you would agree that we are your source of income, and as a result, the consumers are benefiting? Is that
Sure.
pretty correct? Okay.
Yeah.
So if what happened in List Hub happens nationwide, what is the plan for Zillow?
Oh, yeah, so
I mean, if you have none of our data, what is your company?
oh, if we have, okay, so basically it was a shift in how we're receiving MLS source data for the most part. And I think you have a lot of great online marketing opportunities out there. And over the course of the last 10 years or so, you've seen sites like Zillow and Trulia and Homes and Realtor and others kind of be those ones that have a domination, not a domination, but the highest percentage of consumer traffic, and then you have the other regional ones and niche publishers and publishers that could be the next great advertising vehicle of tomorrow, right? So when you get to that level, where in most markets, 80 to 90% of the listings that are in the MLS are coming to Zillow Group brands through the various means, you've kind of risen to a place where you're better served to have that direct relationship with the MLS provider, so we can have specific terms instead of general terms. We can recognize what the MLS as a representation of the brokers in the community would like to see under that relationship. We can streamline much more efficiently and much more quickly how the data gets presented. And especially with mobile being the dominant platform that people are looking at now, it's hugely important to get that listing posted as quickly as possible. So our efforts have really been to go out and work directly with large franchises and brokers and MLSs to be able to provide that efficient pathway, those terms, that support structure to really do that. We've been very successful at it. I think we have about 350 MLS partnerships now in the country that brokers can leverage. We're adding more every month. And the result will be that brokers in a community that are choosing to advertise on Zillow Group brands are then able to leverage the work that they've done in the MLS. The MLS is able to affect how that goes. They're involved in the whole transaction of getting the listings to us. And the listings are coming under a good solid term structure. And what it's essentially done is attach our dependence to you all and the MLSs, which is really necessary to have a fruitful partnership like that. And so I've been very pleased with the arrangements we've been able to craft, because I think a lot of the problems that we've been talking about over the years get solved when we're able to have that kind of direct type of relationship with the service provider and solve the accuracy issues and some of the other things that we've talked about.
Thank you. I'm not sure that was the answer to my question, but it was a good commercial.
I can answer it much more directly if you give me the meat of the question.
We have about 1 minute left. So any quick final comments?
I have one. Do you guys want a useful tip? Now, there's a lot of complexity to what's been discussed today. It's all about connecting realtors and consumers. That's what we're trying to do here. And so if a consumer wants to work with you or is thinking about working with you, what's the first thing they're going to do? They're going to Google you, right? And what's going to come up at the very top is actually within the first couple results will be your Realtor.com profile. The Realtor.com profiles happen to be extremely highly optimized for search engines. So they're going to Google you. Their Realtor.com profile is going to come up. I just want to encourage you, it's absolutely free. Go in there and take 5 minutes and post your bio. Make sure your picture's up to date or not. And put up all your accolades and make sure that it's a colorful, great page when they get there.
Kirby, did you have something else you wanted to quickly say?
Really, to Sherry's question, I guess if I was Spencer Raskoff, one of my biggest worries would be if Wall Street analysts ever found out how precarious their hold is on your data. I would be really worried about my stock valuation if I was running Zillow.
Right.
However,
well, we're all out of time.
there you have it.
And on that note,
What a great discussion. I'd like to remind everyone that the Expo Hall is now open, and there's going to be a great prize drawing in about 15 minutes. We have education classes starting at 11:15, and please don't forget our keynote speaker, Mitch Albom, at 12:30. Thank you so much for joining us today. Take care.